Fairbanks Focus Alaska View is brought to you by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Alaska's first university, and the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation, bringing economic development to interior Alaska.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us here at Fairbanks Focus Alaska View. I'm Nanette Pearson. Our first guests this morning are Jim Dodson and Steve Hagenson.
Good morning. I'm Jim Dodson, President of Fairbanks Economic Development. I'm here today with Steve Hagenson. Steve and I have been talking over the last couple of weeks about possible energy solutions, cost of energy in Fairbanks. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the community utility that was just formed with the cooperation of the City of North Pole, the City of Fairbanks, and the Fairbanks North Star Borough. But before we do that, one of the projects, Steve, that I didn't have a chance to talk about last week when I was talking about the various energy projects that may or may not come online over the next several years in Alaska that would impact this community is the Susitna One-Town Dam. And I did want to talk about that briefly because I know the state government, the governor that's been a favorite project of his and moving forward, and it will have an impact on not only the cost of energy in Fairbanks, but the cost of energy around the rail belt and throughout the electric distribution system. What's your perspective on that? What it might be able to produce energy for, and also a timeline.
Well, the timeline's simple. It's simpler to answer. The FERC, there's a FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission regulates licensing of dams, and so they're starting a process which will be about a 10-year process to construction. That's what they're working on now. They've actually filed the FERC application, or the preliminary application, and they've been allowed, and they have a construction permit that allows them to go out and study this resource. The resource is a very good resource. It's been studied for many years. They put about $130 million, or the state of Alaska invested about $130 million about 30 years ago, and most of that data is still good. So they're looking at about, instead of a larger dam that they had before, they're looking at about a 600 megawatt dam that would be supply energy both to north to Fairbanks and south to Anchorage and the Homer area in the Kenai. So it's a good resource, it's sized correctly, and they're working right now to make sure that they can regulate the water to a use that would be effective for us to use as utilities. So water regulation is an interesting thing. Then there's what's called natural run of river, or the water natural flow, and that's just the water that comes down, and you get more water in the summer than you do in the winter. And when you have a storage dam like Susitna, a very large storage dam, you can actually let the water go when you need the energy. And so the utilities tend to use more energy in the wintertime than they do in the summertime. So you'd want to have, but it's opposite. So you tend to store water until you need it and drop it off. And they're very sensitive to the levels of water in the wintertime, like for salmon habitat. And this will actually help regulate the water flow. So instead of going high in the summer and flooding everything and drying up in the wintertime, they can maintain the water levels. And so they're expecting this could possibly enhance salmon production in that river. So there's a lot of they're doing in the midst of many studies, environmental reviews, and agency coordination. And there's a team at Alaska Energy Authority who's studying that right now.
So if they were able to proceed with that dam, if the state government said the project gets a green light, we're going to move forward with it, when might we expect to see first power off of that dam that we could use in Fairbanks?
In about 10 years. So
10 years.
This is a longer-term solution. So again, can we survive until we get to that energy source in the future?
And that really brings us to the discussion today about the community energy utility that has just been created by the Fairbanks North Star Borough and hopefully is going to be part of the solution. One of the things that has been talked about a lot the energy utility is how it might function, and the people that wrote the ordinance that actually have worked on it have been thinking of it more as a facilitator than an operating entity. In other words, they haven't been talking about actually having employees that would go out and install meters and read meters and send out bills, but rather as a contractor, a facilitator, somebody that could aggregate the interests of the various energy companies and those that are wanting to do business in that arena. How are you envisioning that will work?
Well, first off, let me say that there's a lot of different ideas on how to go forward. I think the one thing I noticed in a lot of testimony during all those approvals was that we have a common goal. And that's to get the cost of energy down to the most people in Fairbanks as fast as possible. So that's the goal. Now, how do we fit into that? So I think the facilitation, and I think the Borough Assembly ordinance actually had a three-part thing. It was first you do facilitation. So let's talk about that. And this is from my perspective only, I'm not talking for any other group or anything, but like I said, there's lots of ideas out there how to go forward. I think the first step is they're going to be putting together their bylaws. And that'll be start out kind of understanding, although a lot of discussion will happen, they'll flesh out a lot of ideas at that point. The second step, in my opinion, should be to do a plan. Understand exactly what you're going to build out, when you're going to build it out, who gets power, when they get power, and lay out the vision. And what I would like to see then is that everybody can come together around that plan. Because if you start just throw a big bucket of money out there and say, here's let's go forward, and everybody starts grabbing pieces of money and doing what they think is right, you're going to have a very hodgepodge approach to this energy solution, and it probably won't work. So I think it's paramount that we have a very focused goal, that we can benchmark along the way and show that we're making progress towards that goal, but it's got to be a cohesive strategic plan.
And one of the things that was written in the ordinance, and it was a mission statement of the original proposers of the utility, was to cut the cost of energy in half, reach as many people as possible in the Fairbanks community with affordable energy in the shortest period of time. Right. Interesting that the governor has stepped forward and offered to assist Fairbanks with its energy issues. And I know that at least one group has met with the governor this week. There's other groups like Golden Valley and Fairbanks Natural Gas, and also Flint Hills, and actually a team that we put together meeting with the governor next week. What do you expect to come out of that?
Well, I think the governor's looking for a solution. But I don't think he wants to give us a solution. I think he wants us to find the solution. And what we've seen in the past is that everybody, like I said, everybody has their different idea on how to go forward. And I think as a community, it was very encouraging to see our borough, the city of North Pole, and the city of Fairbanks all come together with a common goal. I think that's the kind of thing the governor's looking for, is a cohesion to understand where we're going as a community, not just look at one person's interest over the other person's interest, or pick winners and losers. But I think we need to come here as a community and come together and go forward.
Yeah. Interesting when you look at the energy mix in Fairbanks, and Fairbanks, 85% of our community appears to be driven today by diesel fuel or home heating fuel. There is actually 1,100 customers that include 400 commercial and 700 commercial and 400 residential that are on natural gas, and then there's 165 customers on steam, heat, and hot water. But over the years, at least as we have tracked energy at Fairbanks Economic Development, it appears that almost everybody's rates seem to be tied to the increase in crude oil, which I think, unfortunate for this community, for Fairbanks community, has been rising relatively quickly, and all the projections I look at, Steve, are telling me that we're likely to see continual increases in the cost of crude oil. Well, how do you? What's the the utilities' vision is to try to break that tie of Fairbanks Energy to crude oil?
Well, you have to change something, because what we're doing now isn't really working for us. Is look at the cost of fuel oil in the future. EIA, the Energy Information Administration, I think it's called, does a projection every quarter, or maybe twice a year. And that projection clearly shows there's an increase, long-term increase. And they don't get the swings up, the short-term swings, but they get the long-term concept. And it shows a general increase. Now, you could have a short-term disturbance. You could have something like going on in Egypt, where you get little bobbles up and down of a cost pricing thing, but the long-term trend is still up. And so if you want to basically switch fuels, you need to decouple yourself from that fuel. And even this gas supply is not totally decoupled. The contract I heard, I've never seen it, has a certain percent coupling to oil, but it's not a direct one-to-one, it doesn't go up with oil. And so in a national picture, they're trying to decouple gas and oil also. And so if you can separate those two items and treat them separately and don't link one to the other, we'll probably be a good winner. The other thing that longer term picture for Alaska, if we can get tied to a market, say the Henry Hub market or an ACO Hub, which is like a gas trading hub, then you do net back pricing, and you can take the cost to deliver from your place. You talk the cost of the hub, which is a pretty much market index, and you can subtract the cost of getting your gas to that hub, and that's the cost you would pay at that location. So there's a lot of neat strategies that long term, but again, we need to focus on the short term to take care of Fairbanks in the next few years.
Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Samantha Larson, and this is the Fairbanks Focus. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Professor Doug Reynolds, Energy Economics at UAF. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Reynolds.
You're welcome.
So tell me a little bit about your position at UAF. I know you're a professor there. You teach some classes on energy and the economy.
Yeah, I'm a professor of oil and energy economics. I've done a number of academic articles and journals, and I teach oil and energy economics. Of course, I teach other economics courses there and help in general with professor issues and other UAF issues.
Okay. I did a little bit of research. Like you said, you've written a book as well as numerous papers. I have in front of me a copy of Mr. Reynolds' book, if you guys can see that. Energy, Civilization, The Zenith of Man by Douglas B. Reynolds. Tell me a little bit about this book. I found it really interesting. I haven't been able to read all the way through. I'm hoping I can finish that this weekend. But explain to me a little bit about why you wrote it, the purpose of it.
Yeah, when you do a lot of energy work, you realize, and I think everybody's realized over the years, that fossil fuels will run out. And so the question is, when will they run out? Will it be 100 years? Will it be, next year or something like that? Well, I explain the issue, especially with oil, that it is running out, and that's why we're seeing such high prices right now. And so more than that, people say, well, okay, it'll run out, but we'll find solutions. And so let's look at that through history. Has this ever happened before in history? And yes, it has. If you look closely at the fall of the Roman Empire or the fall of the Mycenaeans or the fall of the Mayans, these are all energy issues, and they all fell because of energy issues, not really because of social disarray necessarily. And so when you look at it closely and you see that's happened before, then we're experiencing the same thing now.
Right. One of my very first professors I had, my freshman year of college, a history professor, she always said, to understand today, you have to understand history. So I find it very interesting that you put that into your book. You not only look at today, but how we got to this point and how we can learn from the past. One of the quotes I found really interesting from your book, and I'll just read off the paper in front of me, it says, "A perfect energy storm is coming, involving natural gas, oil, and conventional energy resources."
Right. Well, the perfect energy storm is there's oil. We're at peak oil. And of course, that's debatable, but I won't get into it too much. We're definitely at peak oil. B, natural gas. There's plenty of natural gas in the U.S., but it's bottlenecked it's bottlenecked everywhere it is, and it's very hard to get it out to other places and to use it for transportation. It's not that you don't have enough natural gas, it's that it's bottlenecked and it's hard to use for specific purposes with oil. And then the third thing is nobody wants to use coal, and the other, solar energy and so on are very difficult to use. So when all these come together at the same time, you have a real hard problem. And I think Fairbanks is like the epitome of the oil crisis because we use so much oil for heating and even electricity.
Well, and the prices are just so high.
And they're very high.
There's got to be another option to save us some money.
Yeah.
So now, as we spoke earlier before the show, you were telling me that you've met with state reps, the Energy Board, et cetera, on your take on coal, as far as that being a cheaper resource. I know you told me that you yourself have a coal burner in your home. Yeah. You said for the last 7 years, correct?
Yeah. Well, because Fairbanks is at a unique position where we use so much oil and it's so expensive, we're like at the epitome of the oil crisis, the energy crisis. And basically, it's really hurting our economy. And so when it's hurting that much, beggars can't be choosers. We're begging. You can't be a chooser. One option is coal, and I brought that idea to a lot of the state reps, a lot of the Energy Board, the Energy Authority, the Housing Authority. It wouldn't be that hard to set up several houses at a time on a single boiler. And then once you're on coal, you're basically off the hook for any oil-related prices because the coal mine isn't far from here. It's hooked to our community with a rail that's already in place. So if the price of oil goes up and down, it won't really affect us as much with coal. It would affect actually natural gas, but not so much with coal.
Okay. And do you think if we were to switch to coal, if many people, houses, buildings in the community did switch over to coal from oil, would we be able to sustain that? I mean, would the supply be enough?
Well, the supply, again, the supply of oil is running out in a way. It's at peak oil.
Right.
And so we're at the point where, okay, we all knew this was going to happen. How are we going to get through it? How are we going to deal with it? So, one option is the natural gas. Another option is the coal. Nobody's really talking about the renewables, especially up here, the solar and wind. So we're dealing with it right now. So yeah, we'll have to deal with it again in 100 years. Oh yeah, or 200 years. Oh yeah, and then we'll see. But so right now, let's just deal with the oil question, and then the coal there will probably last 100 years, and on the North Slope 1,000 years as far as what we need in Alaska. Then we'll have to deal with that issue when it comes up. Yes.
Well, true. there's always something going trailing. So I'm really curious about your take on coal as an option. My mom actually has a cabin off of Chena Pump, and she has to have water brought in monthly, oil brought in monthly, and the price is just outrageous. But she loves the privacy out there and the location. So using her as an example in that location, if she switched over to coal, I mean, ballpark, what's the percentage of cost you think would cut back?
You're right. And if you're in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, it's probably not an option, but then neither is natural gas an option because you're just in the middle of nowhere. So one of the problems when you have an oil crisis is it is a crisis. And so you can't just, this beautiful solution, we're going to have this beautiful solution, that's just off the table. It's all going to be ugly. And part of that ugliness is maybe people will have to move into town closer. Okay. And there might be a little more pollution, although actually I think with coal you can deal with the pollution. You can make it tall stacks, cleaner burning boilers and so on. If we do go natural gas, it's not going to be as cheap as everybody thinks. It's not going to be like the lower 48. It's not going to be $10 a million BTU. It's going to be like they have. It's easily going to be 20, and we're paying right now 30, say 35 for 35 per million BTU for our oil. That's $4 or something per gallon. You're going to save maybe $1, maybe $1.50 when you get to natural gas. With coal, you might save half. It's not easy. There's no easy solution.
Right. I'm just trying to give our viewers an idea,
If you want to see an example of the crisis, just go to the Soviet Union. Why did the Soviet Union fall? Well, they had an oil crisis, and it was ugly, and I was there, and all kinds of economic tumult, all kinds of changes. It wasn't easy. It was very hard, and so we have to be prepared for that. It's just going to be very hard.
Right. Well, I think that Fairbanks, as well as UAF, the people that we have working on the energy plan, trying to be more efficient, cost efficient, the last guest that I've had on the show, it seems like they've got a pretty good handle, a really good grasp as far as new options, cleaner options, more cost efficient as far as the future goes. And I think they're really making some headway. Personally, your view for the UAF energy plan, what's your take on it? How do you see it in the future? Do you think that it's going to, benefit the school, the community?
Well, the UAF has two things. They do research, and so they're doing a lot of research and new options. That's always good.
Right.
As far as UAF itself, it's basically a coal-heated, it has actually right now some, I think some fuel oil, but it'll be soon coal-heated. And even if they bring in natural gas, they could switch to natural gas, but if they don't, they're fine. They'll have the coal heated, basically the coal heat's going almost everywhere on campus there. So, and once you're tied to coal, it's pretty cheap. It won't be affected by the price of oil nearly as much. So yeah, I like what UAF is doing. Can the city do the same? It could. Should it? Well, it's up to the people, it's up to what they want. I think now that we have a citywide, a borough-wide utility, quote unquote, I don't know what it's called, the utility agency, they could do a coal option. They could start setting up one at a time with minimal cost. Start setting up one, set up the payments. They could do another, and they could do coal option right now very quickly and solve this. To some degree, I won't say it's going to be as cheap as the lower 48, but they could do that right now.
Interesting, really interesting. Well, I hate to cut the interview short, but of course, we're still on time. I wish we could just talk and talk and talk. There's so much to cover as far as energy goes, not only with UAF but the community. But I'd like to put your book up one more time so our viewers can get
It's at Gulliver's, and it's reasonably priced, and it's signed copies there. So.
I know. I'm super lucky if you guys can see that. He signed it for me. So, but I'm going to try and get through the rest of this weekend. If you're interested, go out, Gulliver's, pick up a copy of the book, see what you think about it. It was a pleasure meeting with you today. Really appreciate it. Look forward to talking with you more later on. That's going to do it for us today on the Fairbanks Focus. I'm Samantha Larson. Have a good one.